I've got good news. Midnight Season 1 is just incredible. And it isn't just the Mythic Plus, it's the raids too. So let's talk about my experience so far and why this season hits so well. And also, where it might not stay so positive in the long term. I think the best starting point for this is the dungeons. Out of any content, I've spent the most time in Mythic Plus so far this season. And as of recording, I've done well over 100 Mythic Plus runs, with most of that done during the first week of the season. And the difficulty curve for this season is absolutely wild. It is a stark contrast from the War Within Season 1, where dungeons like the Stone Vault existed and absolutely brutalized you at a 10 plus level during the first week. This time, not so much. It's pretty easy. There are some root causes for this, and additional dungeon simplicity is a major factor, but also we've had a lot of gear and we've had a lot of crests. The first plus 10 we entered was Windrunner Spire at around 258 item level. That was only a few item levels below what the content actually dropped, and we absolutely blasted the dungeon and almost 3-chested it. I can't remember a time where that was a reality in the first week of the season. But saying that, this is definitely not a complaint. As someone with limited playtime who raids on a Friday and Saturday, maximizing gear acquisition before raid is always pressing. You absolutely want to go and get as much gear as possible before raid starts. This time, I was able to walk into raid on Friday with a full kit of 266 or higher gear. I got all my trinkets, rings, and preferred pieces from Mythic Plus. In the past, we would have farmed most of our gear on Sunday or Monday evening after the raid was done for the week. This was really good for us, and I really like being able to get in there and get gear quickly. Another favorable part of this dungeon pool are the timers. These instances are fast and can be done in 20 minutes or less in some cases. I personally enjoy a quick sprint to the finish as far as dungeons go, so in this case, a short form dungeon, it's what I like. And historically, you've seen players avoid longer dungeons, and so having all of them this season be relatively short is great and offers a lot of good options. As far as individual dungeons go, I'll rapid fire some of my takes here. There are a lot to get through, so we'll keep it pretty brief. The Windrunner Spire is the best of the bunch. It has a good variety of bosses, and every single pull feels rewarding, and they're above average in size. For the most part, you're not going to have 1 or 2 enemy pulls. You're usually going to pull a big hallway, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Nexus-Point Zenith is likely my number 2 pick for favorite. It is quite a good one, but the trash is a bit nasty. I do think it's offset by the dungeon design. You do have limited choice on what to pull, but it absolutely rewards proper play and cooldown usage if you're tanking. Not to mention, it's a visual spectacle. The dungeon looks great. Magister's Terrace was an unexpected treat. I thought this was going to be my least favorite dungeon this season, but I was so very wrong. The only part I didn't really like about this is the jellyfish boss. It's a little bit weird, and I've tanked most of the dungeons, and it is real boring to tank. So not a huge fan of that. But the rest of the instance really makes up for it. You got an incredible last boss, you have good tight trash packs, it's a quick instance overall. It has some of that same visual spectacle that Nexus-Point had. Overall, gets a 2 thumbs up from me. Mysara Caverns was one of my favorite dungeons to run during the M0 week, but I severely dislike it on Mythic Plus. I don't know what happened from a design perspective, but when they calculated how many enemies you needed to defeat to get your count, I think they added about 20% more than was needed. The dungeon feels really good when you can just W key your way through, but right now you end up pulling a huge amount of trash through the entire dungeon, and none of those packs are particularly fun to pull. If they reduce the count requirements, this would move up to an S tier dungeon for me. All of the bosses are good, the layout's cool, it feels like a really good WoW dungeon, but they just missed the mark on the count here. For our returning dungeons, I do have some mixed feelings here. Alge'thar Academy should not have been in this rotation. We had it in the pool multiple times during Dragonflight, and I think it was just too soon for this to return. It doesn't take away from the fact that it's a great dungeon. I just think I've played this too many times to really enjoy another season of it. Maybe if we would have seen it in the last Titan, but certainly not now. Pit of Saron turned out way better than I expected. It is a relic from really about 17 years ago now, and that feels wild to say, but here we are. And I think Blizzard did a good job of modernizing it, but I'm still not a huge fan of open layout dungeons. Give me a good path, let me walk straight through it, give me a little choice on what I'm gonna pull, but that's really it. I do recognize that this is a personal preference, but this is just what I like. My main complaint here is that a few of the bosses feel like they're missing another mechanic, and this is present in a couple of the dungeons, but more specifically here. The Frost Giant boss and then the Death Knight boss at the end, they're just too simple. At best, there are two specific mechanics, and that's it. You're not particularly threatened by the damage intake, and you do those two things and you win. It doesn't feel particularly rewarding, and I would argue it's a bit too simple. If they tacked on another mechanic or two, I'd be a little bit more satisfied, but that's just the reality we live in right now. Seat of the Triumvirate makes a triumphant return. It was one of the most hated dungeons from Legion, primarily due to some weird trash interactions, and then it was definitely overtuned, but this season certainly redeems it. My one complaint about this dungeon is the encounter room for the last boss, Lura. The ceiling is too low. I have to zoom my camera in just to see the marks we're supposed to hit, and that doesn't really feel like a fun part of the game. I shouldn't have to fight my camera, I want to fight the boss. My friends and I were saying that this encounter would have been way better if the ceiling just got blown off the top, and it would have been perfectly fine. Would have been a really great encounter. Last but not least is Skyreach. So this one I think is a little controversial. I've heard some rumblings where some people really aren't liking this one this time around, and it is an older dungeon that certainly shows its age. And there are some really nasty trash mobs, and if you don't interrupt them, you're going to have a problem. But doing this dungeon as a DPS is a blast. Tanking, not so much. Some of the enemies here, specifically some of the claw-related enemies at the tail end of the dungeon, are very challenging. They put a really nasty armor shred and bleed, and it's a lot of damage. Manageable, but it's a lot of damage. And even with that being said, I think this dungeon was modernized well. I like the wind mechanics on the first boss. Second boss is a little bit boring, but all in all, it's still pretty fun, even with its problems. And that's the thing here. All of these dungeons, even the ones I don't like, are still really good. There are no real crap dungeons in this pool, and I'm happy to run any of them. I will say though, this season's been a little bit different for me. For the past couple years, I've DPS'd the large majority of my keys, but due to some changes with our guild and our tanks, guess what? I'm tanking about 85% of my time in keys, for better or for worse. I prefer to DPS, but I'd rather run in a guild group, and I'm the only player in my group that runs at this time of day that has a tank off spec. And so Prot Paladin right now, it feels very strong. However, other times you feel like wet paper. We're fairly susceptible to stacking bleeds, and a few of the dungeons here have a ton of those. Most notoriously is the first pull on alge'thar Academy. The bleeds those lashers put out are no joke. If you get 4 or 5 stacks on that thing, it's a real bad time. We're still able to pull the entire room and group it up and hold it well, but as soon as you're out of defensive cooldowns, you're going to be forced to bubble to clear your stacks. You can technically kite them out a little bit, but my elemental shaman friend would have a heart attack if I dragged them out of his earthquake. So you pop your divine shield and sit and wait and hope for the best. For Retribution, it's been a blast in keys. Really, really fun and quite frankly, really, really good, and I play it every chance I can get. And I found while pugging, running Radiant Glory is always the play at really anything below a 12 key. There are just enough unknown factors where running a flexible build is a bit better. If you are doing higher keys or running with an organized group, Execution Sentence is absolutely the play. Having some funnel and doing some really big damage every minute tends to play out very well when you are organized. And one of the things that I was quite frankly wrong about during the beta is our talent trees. So we lose very little single target damage to pick up our AoE nodes, and that's honestly a really good place to be. I wish I could say all of our nodes were high impact, but the reality is all of our damage is focused in a very few areas, so as long as we double down on those areas, your talent points are very low impact. And I'm having a blast every time I do a key this season, whether I'm tanking or whether I'm playing as Ret or whether I'm playing on my Demon Hunter, it is fun. And I'm really looking forward to pushing up to a little bit of a higher key level a little bit early on. Been a bit busy with gear and raid right now, but I think we're going to start pushing soon. So let's shift into raids and why these have been so successful so far. And I want to give a bit of context to where I'm coming from. So Death Jesters, we only raid 6 hours a week, so our time is very limited. And because of those time limitations, I have preferences that are based around that. If I raided 9, 12, 15, however many hours a week, or did overtime or whatever the case is, my opinions would be different. But because of our limited playtime, I've enjoyed things being stretched out a little bit more. And the biggest contributing factor to this has been the 3 raid structure. For most guilds, having the encounter spread out allows for a bit more time to take it easy or not rush. And I think that's a net positive. And having 2 less bosses and not having the March on Quell Danas available immediately was probably a good thing. It made the story impact a little bit better. It gave us a cool visual of the Darkwell for a week or so, and I like that. I think that was pretty cool. In addition, you get a cool variety of visual content in these raids. It's not just void all the time. You have some void stuff, you have some Silver Moon stuff, you also have the Dream Rift. There's a good bit of variety here, and I think that's a net win. When it comes to bosses, at least on Heroic, they're all pretty fun, but it is just Heroic. And for Mythic, to be determined. I haven't done all the encounters yet, so I won't be able to say for certain, but initially they look quite good. Crown of the Cosmos, as far as not end encounters go, but a type of end encounter, it was an absolute treat. The collapsing platform was awesome. And then if we look towards Midnight Falls, it has an incredible intermission and phase 2. They look awesome and they're fun to play. I will note that Blizzard does need to work on optimizing some of the encounters visually. Belloren, the bird boss, was a big problem. And I have a behemoth of a PC and I was still dipping below 60 FPS for a large part of that encounter, and I really don't have a great reason why. I know we do have the spell density filter in the graphics settings, but there are just so many allied spell effects that are still showing up unnecessarily. I think they need to do a bit more work there. And so for us right now, we're sitting at 4 out of 9 mythic bosses, and we're aiming to wrap up dragons this week. And we have a lot of progress left to do this tier, but I do think it's worth mentioning how this 3 raid structure is going to affect farm for us. So historically, we extended our lockout after killing the second to last boss, and then we put our full focus into the final encounter for the season. If that was the case for us here, we would have locked out after doing Belloren and then focused entirely on Midnight Falls. One of the problems with locking out that early is we don't get a raid vault for the entire rest of the extension period. And some of the items are really strong, and we tend to sacrifice that for more time on the end boss. However, things are a little different here. This time around, we can now pop into Dream Rift, kill Chimeras on Mythic in a few minutes, you secure that vault slot, and then you can go straight back into progress on the end boss. If you wanted to spend a little bit more time, you could even do another 3 bosses in the Void Spire, you get your 2 box and call it a day. That shouldn't be a huge time sink, and I don't think we'll do it that much, but at the very minimum, I'd expect we usually will get 1 box through the entirety of our progress on Midnight Falls. While it won't be a game changer for a lot of guilds, it's going to be a great quality of life change for us. Maximizing our time is important, and being able to get a vault every week and still focus on extending is going to be really good. And generally speaking, I have enjoyed every single boss we've done, whether it's been heroic, mythic, normal, whatever it's been a really cool experience. I think Blizzard did a good job with the boss design. They aren't as hard as I was expecting them to be, but maybe they're just finding their footing, and they're certainly making up for it on Midnight Falls right now. That boss looks like it's going to be a rough time, but it also looks really good. One thing I'm surprised for is that there aren't more single target encounters. That's something that's a staple, and right now, Veracius is probably the only boss that is technically a single target encounter, but even so, it still has little bug adds that it spawns. Beleren has bird adds that come up, so there's some cleave there. And then even on Lura, the Midnight Falls encounter, you have some crystals that come up. That's the most single target of the bunch, but even so, this is way more cleave and AoE than what we've seen historically. It's definitely a little weird. As far as Retribution goes, it's definitely on the higher side for melee tuning, and I think it's a great spot to be. We aren't the top performing DPS, but we're certainly in a comfortable spot with single target and being able to index into some additional cleave damage with low cost. I think that's good, and it's a huge change up compared to past tiers. And while this probably won't last in the long term, and as the patch goes by, we're likely to drop a couple spots down, I think it's a good place to land. Way better than what we've seen before. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about Midnight systems, and we'll go fast here. But specifically the new crest changes. This isn't a huge change, but I do think it's a significant one. Having the track scale to 100 crests and then split by difficulty levels is a really good change. It made every track valuable again, and hero crests specifically actually important to upgrading your mythic level gear. We're in a world right now where ranks 5 and 6 make you skip the first 2 ranks of mythic upgrades every single time, and that makes that gear feel valuable. And I think the initial gear acquisition curve for the entire expansion so far also felt pretty great. You were always working towards something, and being able to spend your crest freely on anything below hero track felt rewarding. World of Warcraft feels best when you're able to upgrade and progress your character, and Midnight definitely created an environment where that was frequent and it felt good. Getting gear has been easier than ever. You can use a combination of delves and the praise system to load up on champion gear and the associated crests. I was able to slam my Demon Hunter all the way up to the mid 260s without even entering a Mythic Plus dungeon with relatively minimal investment. And I think gear accessibility is important because having really everyone in the community able to gear up quickly and feel powerful, I think is good and healthy for the game. Is everyone going to get mythic gear quickly and efficiently? No, but there are paths to getting champion and hero track that are very fast and still very rewarding. Well, that's pretty good. Everybody wins there. Okay though, so what's the bad here? Raids are phenomenal, we have a great dungeon pool, and the gearing systems have been improved? Well, big surprise, it's the add-ons. Blizzard's war on add-ons has been an abject failure. We still have 95% of the functionality that we did before, it's just split over a worse selection of add-ons with less customization than what we had before. Even the simplest things like a combat timer or a buff reminder for something like Devotion Aura, or did I have my pet summoned, or whatever the case is, that has to be handled by a unique add-on. And since Midnight started, I've increased my add-on count substantially. While the UI looks mostly the same, it is just a little bit worse than before. I've had to mix and match add-ons to get half as much functionality that WeakAura offered in one single thing. And there are add-on conflicts between different add-ons, because sometimes they'll tack on a ton of extra features that I don't want, or they overlap between two, and that just feels bad. Saying I miss WeakAura is an absolute understatement. And while I do have minor complaints over some of that stuff, I think the biggest issue here has still got to be debuff display. This is primarily a problem for healers, but I do think it's present on both your personal debuffs and private auras. So Blizzard's solution was to lock down the majority of debuffs into private auras, which I think is sort of fine, but they didn't lock down all of them. So when you're tracking something, it's going to show up, if it's a private aura, into your private aura frame. But the thing is, there are still critical debuffs that aren't private auras, so they're going to show up somewhere else. So if you're trying to get information streamlined into one area, that's not happening. And before, you could just customize what you wanted to display. There were filters, or you could just target by spell ID and display something specifically that you want. So let me use a simple example that I found that's just been a little bit frustrating. So on Chimeras, you're flooded with private auras. You're going to go downstairs, you get to go into the Aln realm, and when you do that, you could have up to 4 private auras display on your screen. One of them is a light damage over time effect. It's important, but not critical. One is a debuff for taking extra damage if you try to go down again. Also not important, you don't really need to see that. And then one is the timer for actually being downstairs in the Aln realm. I would argue you don't really need to track any of those. The one thing you do need to track is Rift Madness, and that's only in the Mythic encounter. So there was one time during progression where I had 3 debuffs and then I got Rift Madness, and I didn't realize it because there were 4 debuffs showing up in my, we'll say, priority frame, but there wasn't a way for me to categorize which one was more important. It was just information overload. And I know that's not a huge deal, and I made sure to really keep eyes out for it in future attempts, but the first time that happened, I was like, wow, that's a lot of debuffs on me. That's way more than I'd like to show. I wish I could filter that, but I can't. And if I was using a weak aura, like in times past, I'd only display Rift Madness and I'd ignore the rest. That one's the only relevant one, so why can't I filter that? And this is only one issue. There are many other encounters that have the same type of problems. And the current UI, it just provides you information in a worse, less customizable way than what we had in the past. And this isn't a season exclusive problem. It's grating and it puts a damper on my enjoyment of the expansion as a whole. And I don't know if we're going to see any major changes to this until the last Titan, so we might be stuck with sort of a weird system for a while here. I do know Blizzard is looking forward to improving this feature, but we're not there yet. And I would like to make one recommendation if Blizzard's listening. Have a unique frame, call it encounter debuffs or something. And then as a player, let me select what I want to put in that frame. Have a menu or a drop down, or maybe even bake it in with a dungeon journal where you can check a box and say, okay, I want this debuff to show up in the encounter frame. Maybe it's even a setting you opt into. I don't know. I just need some way to customize and filter out what I want. Because let's be real, some of the things you have private auras are just useless information. So that, yeah, there's my rant. And those are my first impressions of Season 1 of Midnight. Quite frankly, I'm hyped to log in every day and I'm really having a blast. And I hope you are as well. This season is shaping up to be incredible and honestly way better than I could have expected. And it's looking to continue to be good. But only time's gonna tell. I want to give a big thank you to our patrons. They make creating this content possible. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the best place to do it is Patreon. As a member, you gain access to things like log reviews, UI support, blog updates, Jesir Radio, and more. Take a look. As always, thank you for watching, and good luck out there in Season 1.